Hello, testing. Okay, thank you all for being here with us today. We are really lucky to have two great speakers who I've actually met before. Let me just introduce myself quickly. I'm Sarah. I'm a China tech reporter for Bloomberg News in Hong Kong, covering Chinese internet companies and obviously also AI, this transformative technology, which is what we're here to talk about today. So let me just quickly introduce our two panelists. We have Ken Xu. He is a veteran venture capitalist, currently a venture partner at CMC Capital Partners, previously at Gobi Partners. And then we have Esther Wong. She is the founder and chief investment officer of 3 Capital, which is a USD AI PE fund. Previously, she spent more than 6 years at SenseTime, which, as we all know, is one of China's leading AI companies. So let's set the scene here today. Esther, can you talk about, why you decided to found 3 Capital and why you decided to make the bet on early stage AI startups?
Okay, so thank you for the question. So as Sarah mentioned, before I founded 3 Capital early this year, as a matter of fact, I was one of the earlier employer of SenseTime. So when I joined, it was 50 people, and when I left, it was 5,000. So I was in charge of 2 things when I was at SenseTime. The first one is capital markets, just raise money. So we raised around $5 billion plus or minus US dollar for the company. But the more interesting thing is I was in charge of strategic investment when I was there. So 6 years ago, rewind 6 years ago, it was the era of AI 1.0. 1.0 is when you know that the technology exists, you don't know how well it can actually monetize or commercialize. So the job of a strategic investment team was actually try different verticals to see what are the actual usage and applications and how to quickly let the technology take off. So with that as a background, last year, as everybody here knows, is AI 2.0, where it's being marked by the sector being completely democratized. Everybody has some exposure to AI now. So how to best capture this opportunity? By staying with a big corporate, it's not probably as flexible as having your own platform. So you can actually invest not just within China, but also outside of China on a global scale. Because in the era of AI 2.0, a lot of opportunities is actually coming from overseas as well. So that's the background of 3 Capital.
Makes sense. And then Ken, what about for you? I mean, you've been investing from China for so many years. After the onset of ChatGPT, how would you describe sort of the explosion of interest in AI in China?
I think just look back, back to SenseTime time, right? So I think AI always being a hot topic for Chinese kind of investors. But I mean, last year certainly the general grounded breaking to another stage. We see so the whole kind of society is starting to kind of understand what AI can do to them and for them. And also because I think the mobile internet has been getting to a certain stage when we need something new really to enable the whole older infrastructure to get to the next stage. So that's the AI kicking, the new era AI kicking. So I think that's the area we always focus because if we're looking for no matter infra level or kind of an application level, China has both very strong kind of so-called momentum in both sides. And if we look back for the general kind of ICT industry, that's application, hardware, and so new device, that circle can or go around for 3-4 kind of life cycles. So that's the things kind of people starting kind of very focused on. But as Esther mentioned, last year is also pretty kind of a critical moment for the AI because China and the US starting to kind of treat things in different ways, right? And we have a lot of kind of discussion about how we kind of can invest companies in China by foreign investors and how we help how we can invest the company overseas, in the US market. And I think the talking is still going on, and we sort of met some problem we never met before, but also but we think that's also the great opportunity because of that sort of bottleneck right now we face. I think once we getting through the whole kind of bottleneck stage, I mean the momentum of growth will be great. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about this a little bit backstage just now about
Yeah.
how the U.S. is still the one that's leading a lot of the AI investment and innovation opportunities.
Right.
I guess I'm wondering, we've seen some major Chinese tech leaders, Alibaba's Zhou Cai, for example, saying
Right.
that China still lags behind the U.S. in AI for 2 years. Li Kaifu saying that China's still waiting for its ChatGPT moment. Esther, I wonder what you make of this and this gap and how Chinese players can still, sort of compete and catch up here.
So I do believe that this is a very good question, by the way. So in order to generate AI, we need 4 things. Okay, you need a lot of data. From that perspective, China and U.S. is, for the most part, pretty uneven ground. The second thing is you need algorithm. Algorithm, at the end of the day, is human capital. For that, we are not in any lacking because tons of smart Chinese people in U.S., in China, in everywhere, right? The third one is hardware. This is an area that China is running into a little bit of a bumpy road. Last night, NVIDIA announced earnings. First quarter earning for NVIDIA, the revenue is $23 billion, okay? So you can see that while the hardware tech boom is exploding, they don't, unfortunately, whatever solution that they ship to China is a castrated version of that. So that actually, think about as if the US is cooking in a sous vide kitchen and China is cooking with potentially, oven, with fire oven, okay? So that is its problem. And the fourth thing, however, that I think China has a real advantage is the feedback loop. What do I mean by that? A feedback loop is essentially 试错成本, okay? Because there's a lot of people in China. So if something works or something doesn't work, you can actually tell quite fast and quite immediate. And that's why in the past AI 1.0 era, China has a lot of this amazing company that's excel in operation. So one of the key example is TikTok, for instance, Meituan. Do they have the latest technology? It's okay, not bad. But are they good in operation? Oh my God, they're definitely world class. So I think in terms of this, I will say this dynamic. China can actually still excel, but it will take a slightly longer and slightly more treacherous path. But it's not doable. And that's why I think application layer, which I think Ken is the expert here, will have some opportunities.
Just as I mentioned, I think one thing is very important, just for the infra level, China has been working that very heavily and diligently last couple of years. But we have to say, just like the iPhone is made by the US first, right? But the whole mobile internet is sort of booming, and the model is sort of get really mature in China. I think similar things happen here as well, because we do have the huge kind of user market, and the so-called the loop and the feedback system is sort of more efficiently than the US. And also because we are in a fully new ground, so everything we don't have the traditional so-called infra as a so-called the backpack needed to take off. For example, here every people use a mobile payment. You go back to US, right? So Apple Pay maybe that's still the most advanced kind of payment system there. And you want to find a QR code to scan. Sometimes Chinese shop they have it, but for the most big shop they don't have that one. You still have to bring your kind of wallet, to in case, you can't pay for it. But in China, I think most people do not have their wallet with them, most of the time, unless they go some other cities. Yeah. So I think the things like that. But also the key challenge of application level right now is because the so-called the fundamental algorithm and the so-called the big language model, right, LLM, is still in the so-called evolving kind of stage. So concept-wise, how we really understand where things goes, it may be the kind of the key challenge for local kind of entrepreneurs and startups. We have to wait for the ChatGPT and the Google to really tell us what's the next big things, and that's the thing maybe come out. We can quickly react on what's the so-called middle level kind of so-called revolution, and we can kind of follow up. So that's the things is key challenge for the application level players in China. And I'm not really so optimistic on that way, but I still take maybe 1 or 2 years to really feed the gaps, like between U.S. and China on the kind of so-called middle kind of layer level things. Like, I'm not sure about Esther thinking. Like, she may have better kind of more participant opinions than me, but I mean that's my take for the market for now. Yeah.
Well, then, speaking of that, on the infra layer of things, we talked about, NVIDIA's explosive growth, the importance of compute and data centers. Esther, where do you see investment opportunities in that side of things?
Okay, this is a great question because one of the reasons that I started my fund is actually to focus on the AI infrastructure layer. Right? Think about it. Regardless of whatever AI explosion, regardless of whatever APP exploded, the end of the day, you need more compute, right? So that is the increase of compute is a certainty. So with that, when we say AI infrastructure, there's actually 4 different subcategories. So number 1 is data set. Now, data set is interesting because how you do data collection and how you do data curation is 2 very different skill set. And so you have typical, one of the great company in this space is called Scale.ai. They recently just raised $1 billion round at 17 billion valuation. So that's one on data. And that's an area that China and US is a little bit on sort of equal, but not exactly equal ground. And the reason is because most of the usable data on the internet for AI training is in English. Only 5% usable one is in Chinese. So if you have access to both Zhihu and Wikipedia, when you train your AI model, you tend to use Wikipedia, right? So that's number 1 on data. The second layer is what we call those model. So every 5 years, there's a new transformative model that came out. So when I started at SenseTime, it was the transformer, right? Before that, 5 years before that, it was CNN, okay, convoluted neural network. And then before that, it was SVM. So if you look at history, you can think into the future. And then every 5 years, there'll be a new model that comes out. So that would be opportunity because with new model, you have new companies such as OpenAI spring out of it, right? So that's the second part. And obviously OpenAI being the typical mega player here is already 100 billion plus. Now the third layer is NVIDIA and the lights. So you have the hardware guys. So if you listen to Jensen Wong's latest speech at Stripe, how big is this sector? According to Jensen, right now, all the data center, most of the data center in the world right now, almost $1 trillion worth of data center is still relies on, AI 1.0 or CPU, normal computing, right? Not accelerated computing. So in order to replace them in the next 5 to 7 years, that market size alone is $2 trillion. Now, I think it's a little bit difficult to think about how many zeros are there in trillion, but it's a lot. And NVIDIA alone absolutely cannot eat out the entire 2 trillion. So there's a lot of opportunities there. And so this is what my fund is focusing on. And also the final one is, okay, now that you have the infrastructure, you want to build something on top of that. And not everybody is a data scientist. In fact, 99.9% of the world cannot code. But guess what? In the era of large language model, not just corporates, eventually you and I will have our own personal language model that's specially catered to us. So on that layer, on that cloud layer, you have companies such as Databricks, right? Databricks is the world's second most valuable private company. The most valuable private company is OpenAI. The second one is, on that layer is Databricks. It's around $40 billion. So yeah, we do see a lot of opportunities here.
And Ken, on the application side of things,
Right.
I mean, obviously one big risk is, you don't know how to monetize. It's very capital intensive, and different sectors have different applications. Where do you see the opportunities there at the moment?
I think compared to the kind of the internet, like, we always say like internet, used to say internet is so-called a new labor force, right? We say that a lot. But when we think about AI, internet not really kind of, it's not really labor force. It's more like the information kind of, portal or hubs, right? So it's connect you, but still like you have to do all the things yourself. Like you have to have the the physical labor down there to really work things out. But we talk about AI, we sort of realize it's sort of new, that's the really new labor force. And for the application level, I think it's the key difference between the so-called the last kind of era of the mobile internet and the AI is, when you see the application, AI actually not only on kind of sort of the software layer, it's also kind of penetrated to the so-called hardware layer. So we have, for example, a lot of investors have been invested in so-called like people as automotive cars, like for a while. So that's actually thinking about it. That's AI plus so-called maybe a robot, but it's a car kind of type of things. And right now, you see a lot of boats kind of out there, like big ones, small ones, like But think about them enabled by the AI. It's really become the so-called the new labor force workforce. So it's sort of changing the whole kind of so-called ecosystem and the so-called the society structure, like greatly. And so when we think application on the so-called AI, we will see. Well, I would say that this model is more straightforward because it's really kind of replaced like the former labor force. So I mean the price, the price definition and the so-called ROI is compare easy to calculate. And also like the other things is like if we think about like I see the screens here, like we don't need the translation people anymore. So the AI actually really plays the so-called real-time translator guys. I mean that guy's sort of expensive. Like when we think about like we get 20 years before, like go to IBM's forum, like the ladies is there and do the so-called not proper translation, and that cost is still very high. So I think the monetization is compared easier, but the challenge will be the cost of this application. Just as Esther mentioned, like that cost is much higher than the internet. Think about it, like all the power you use, all the kind of the card you use, and all the kind of this data you have to kind of put into the models to make things work. So I mean it's a very different model, but I would say like for the kind of for the AI application level, we see like the company like will break even bigger ground and they will make bigger companies. So, like for example, like the Uber, like it's like kind of $1 trillion company. But if you think about if the AI is really kicking the industry, that'll be like I mean at least 10 times like than the Uber right now. So I mean like that's the beauty of application level, but it takes a long time. So we're waiting for Esther to invest more in infra level companies, make the cost lower. So that's make the application level companies can grow to next stage with compare controllable cost structure. That's the things I think right now we need to really kind of thinking about.
And Esther, because you spent so many years at SenseTime, we saw in China last year this 百模大战, right? Battle of 100 models. I'm wondering, do you see any investment opportunities still in the large language model sort of space?
SenseTime also have the big model, right?
Yes,
Yes,
as a matter of fact, SenseTime does. And I think one of the challenges that as investor, I think there's a lot of investors here, is that whenever there is a publication on a model, that will come along with it a quote-unquote third-party result that says the model ranks #1 amongst blah, 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 right? And being one of the industry player, I mean, unfortunately, that these kind of third-party is a little bit arbitrary, to be fair. So it's very difficult for a regular investor that is not deep dive into the world of AI to say, okay, this company is better than that company. I don't think that exists. So let's just, be clear about that. So that's why I said maybe a better way to do investment in this world when AI is definitely blossoming is not to touch that layer because the commercialization is still not quite clear. However, what we can do right now is that the world needs compute. Okay, how much compute do we need? The compute that we need is, if you believe in Zheng, 2 trillion market size, okay? So there's good news and bad news with that, okay? The bad news is that if you guys follow any AI companies, in the last 1 year alone, just about any company that with the name AI, the valuation is go up like this, like a hockey stick. So in the past, when you can get A round at say 100, maybe 200 million, some of these A round or B round is already over $1 billion. right? So as an investor, the choice is quite limited. But here's the good news. The good news is this particular cycle we are looking at is literally the next industrial revolution, right? So the company that survived the cycle and can win can produce far greater return than the company that you lose. Think about when is the last crazy bubble that you guys remember? So I'm a little bit older. So the last crazy bubble was the internet bubble. I don't know how many of you here actually know Netscape or Excite at home. Am I? Okay, that's two hands. I saw 2 hands here. So if you invest in those guys, you lost your shirt, but guess what? You also have Amazon. So all your losses, so even though some players are hype up and eventually die, but the one remaining can give you outsized return because Amazon's also from that era. Now, same with what we are here. So a lot of these guys will die, yes. However, the remaining ones will give you outsized return. So that's why with the fund, which is 4+4, right? Just like a lot of funds, you need to play a long game. So instead of spread and pray, like a lot of the VC funds we do, we actually focus on incubating very, very specific project that we believe that is so fundamental, so core that it will be able to weather the storm at least for the next 4 years, because that's our investment period. And where do I find those opportunities? Data center.
I think you raise a really good point because we did see last year, basically every tech company was trying to say that they were doing AI, right? I heard an instance of a startup that they just added AI to their name and immediately got a term sheet. So I guess, Ken, for you then, how do you sort of navigate this when there's so much noise, so many companies saying we have the next potential AI application that's going to blow up?
Oh yeah, I mean, as Esther mentioned, VCs are always crazy about new things, especially. I mean, that thing is really kind of, we sort of, have I think most of the venture investors have the certainty, that thing will happen sooner or later. So that's the things, that's the so-called the common sense of among the VC society. But also, if we take a step back, we don't really need so much so-called platform companies. If we look all what happened on the general kind of so-called high-tech society, there are few people are left. But I mean, if you're looking the whole landscape in the kind of those so-called the new tech, but right now become the traditional industry. For example, the so-called big data, all these things. You'll find apart from those kind of very, very strong kind of key anchors, key applications, there's certain kind of vertical things which is beauty, in certain things they solve certain problem, and they kind of survive well in the different circles. So I mean, of course, we're all chasing the big things, and there's a report, on the VC society, if you're missing some of the so-called unicorns, you'll never be the top VCs in the societies, a certain kind of vintage years. That's for sure. But if you're looking the long term, so put the kind of time frame into 15 or 20 years, there's some VCs really kind of, doing well because they kind of put their money in those kind of so-called not really so hype, but so-called fundamental kind of, so-called in the moving the needle kind of players, things like that. I think just I correct things I'm saying, but if you look back 20 years, the internet actually is very costly as well. It's hard for you to find a computer, find the computing power as well back to that time it's harder for you to connect to the internet properly with certain bandwidth as well. But the ecosystem, when the ecosystem become mature, China actually certainly take the advantage of the whole maturity of the ecosystem in the 2005, 2006, and until 2012. So that's the reason we sort of, we sort of, copycat from a lot of things from the US, right? Such as Apple and Android phone, whatever. So become the local infrastructure. But if we're looking about things the ecosystem is the things that really help those kind of so-called application level companies become successful. Apart from the general kind of, this big kind of, the mass market, the platform or so-called the computing powers, still there's a lot of kind of vertical things. For example, like the storage, like high-speed storage, and the fiber transition, like all these things, which you may not see or may not notice, but they certainly decide how the ecosystem become mature. Even the things like similar things to as the browser for the internet, right? Those things become very important. Like H5 kind of protocol for the mobile internet. So I think for us, of course, we're chasing the big trend, but also we're looking for the vertical small companies doing those things to really kind of chasing to really follow how to really supply the whole ecosystem moving in a more smooth ways. And I think that's compared to sort of to understand those companies' business, because it's easy to define the things is valuable or not. And also the founding team, do they have so-called similar experience in the so-called doing the similar things?
Both of you have experience looking at, some of the opportunities in China, but also globally as well. But we also know that AI, it's evolving so quickly. There are all these regulatory, geopolitical risks as well, with chips access and even sensitivity around, Chinese investors in certain areas. I guess, how do you grapple with this, Esther, when you're looking at different opportunities?
Well, the fund itself is obviously region agnostic. We try to, the fund is a US dollar fund, so naturally we stay away from China. We tend to look more into US and other regions. So the data center I was talking about, we actually incubated is in Southeast Asia, right? Most likely to be one of the largest independent data center, AI data center in Southeast Asia and in this part of the world. But coming back to your question, genuinely, when you want to get into a deal, when a deal is very hot, first of all, I got very skeptical on that, okay? Because we think about all these quote-unquote hot deals that you guys look into in the past, how many of them actually come to fruition? Probably not that many. But apart from it, but if you really want to get into a very interesting idea, I think there are two things that's important. Number one, either you come from a very, very big name, very good track record, you felt like the company felt like by having you move them to the next level, right? So that's very important. Unfortunately, that's not the case with my fund, because it's a new startup fund. Think about it, right? It's 2 months old. So the way we do it is that, unlike a lot of the other pure financial investors, we are actually industry players. What do I mean by that? So by incubating our own data center, think about what does a data center need. We need chips. We need, we need cloud computing solutions. We need data set computing solutions. So when you want to invest in companies within the ecosystem, they know, we're not just a pure financial investor. We're not just a fund with, 3 months of track record, but guess what, with a whole entire ecosystem behind us. So for a founder, and this is what I found out because I was also a founder myself, of course, it's great to have an investor with a great name. But what's more important than having a great name is an investor that truly understands your philosophy, that can go the distance with you. And by having an industry behind your fund, that would be the way to go.
And Ken, what about for you? On the ground in China and then in North America as well. How do you see the differences?
Yeah, I think we're in a very weird kind of time frame right now. Because, generally speaking, we all sort of feel kind of a deglobalization is becoming trending for almost all the countries, right? But also, we sort of, have a big pool of the kind of entrepreneurs with so-called global experience. So, how to kind of, combine these two so-called the factor together to really navigate through this kind of so-called tough period is lessons and also the challenges for the VCs, I would say. But so for us, one thing is for investor, especially in the current stage, I would say there's no investor can only focus on one of the kind of area market, because there's no way for the company can stand the kind of in certain market to do not care about what happening in the other countries and the other era. But also, like, these things is basically like you can't put eggs in all the eggs in the basket because you don't know what happened in a certain market. Like, has been proved, like, even this very promising market, even in China, we meet different challenges, right? U.S. as well, like, Japan. Recently, all people know what happened, right? Very promising and certainly changed. So I would say, like, for us, like, we would like to help the kind of, the company we invested, even they are kind of, so-called have very deep root or ground in certain countries, but we will encourage them to explore the different market. And as Esther mentioned, that's the thing you have to do, like, we're not only as an investor, but also as a kind of so-called co-partner or BD kind of, guys, like the GR guys, for them to really help put their foot in the different kind of areas. I would say, like, that will become major trend for the investor. If you can help the companies in the other countries, that's kind of increased the so-called the possibility of success for your investment, and also help you hedge the risk of the certain market. So that's the thing that we have to do, like, from kind of, for, I would say, for a very long time of period.
Since we're running out of time here, just final question for the two of you. We've talked about the excitement, the potential of AI, but it's also a very disruptive force. So for the two of you, what do you think? Is it more exciting? Is it worrying? Where do we stand right now with AI?
So if you just let me get 30 seconds, I want to give a little bit addition to the previous question, because I think it's a very good question. When I say that a founder, like investor, that truly understand them and go the distance with them, there's a recent example. So my fund is new, okay? It's a 3-month-old fund. Recently, we got into a round of a very highly priced U.S. chip company. Not only we got into the round, we actually got into a heavily discounted round, to the extent that the banker who was in charge of the IPO was stunned. He said, "Esther, how did you get into this deal?" Right? Not because I'm a good talker, but just because we understand this AI chip sector so extensively that when the founder talked to us, they felt like they met somebody who can go the distance with them. So that's important. Now, going back to your question, what does AI do? Essentially, AI is a tool to make the marginal cost of intelligence zero, right? Think about what happened last time. Give you one of the example is 150 years ago. That's when engine first replaced horse carriages. So the marginal cost of travel went to zero. It did not just replace all the horses on the planet, right? It actually led to man exploring Mars. The potential is enormous. So now we're at the age where the marginal cost of intelligence is zero. There's going to be tremendous amount of opportunity that is going to flourish out of that. But different stage of this opportunity, we invest in different things. Because now it's only starting, we focus on infrastructure more. In 2-3 years' time, we can focus on application platform layer more. And then in another 2-3 years' time, by then some people believe that AGI will happen. Then we can focus on application layer more. Why, for my personally, why don't I focus on application layer now? Is because, and I firmly believe that AGI could potentially happen within the next 5 years. Which means that anything you invest right now can get wiped out very easily. So that's why I focus on the picks and shuffle.
And Ken, what about you?
Just like all the discussion we had before, I strongly believe, that kind of new workforce, labor force is going to change a lot. Maybe not everything, but the majority of the society. So I think, from my personal perspective, I'm a little bit scared. So what happened next? But also, I would say, all the investors mentioned that the ethic of the entrepreneurs. That's the things we really should take more care of right now, especially for the AI companies. Because, how the entrepreneurs navigate those technology into next stage will decide where we go for the next 5 to 10 years. Hopefully those guys are not really going to destroy us, right? It's just like the like the Terminator, whatever, those things in the sci-fi movies. But I would say like, I mean, that thing is so promising. So we have to be very careful, not only as an investor, entrepreneurs, and all people participating in this kind of so-called the new trend. I mean, that's the things like, I would really suggest every investor to be very careful for the entrepreneurs you picked. That's a very, very tough job for you to do, actually.
Yeah, that's a good point. Hopefully AI doesn't replace all of our jobs yet. But thank you guys so much for this very enlightening discussion, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you for such a good sharing. Please take a photograph at first and have a rest.